Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Season 3 Invitational. I'm Nick Miller alongside Sean McKeown. How you doing, sir?
Doing pretty good.
Always good to see you.
Still playing on day 2, so I'm no complaints.
Don't get to see you that often at events, but when you're here, you're always doing well, and you got some spicy brews in Legacy and Standard. But we'll be talking about Standard today. 4-0'd with a blue-red Dragons build, very reminiscent to what Mike Flores kind of debuted back in the RPTQs.
It was specifically templated off of his deck using the parts that worked.
Okay, so you've got like this blue Super Dragonland based deck. You've got Crucible and Haven, along with 4 of the 5 Dragon Lords. I still think you could have fit the 5th one in if you wanted to.
While I could have, it didn't do enough.
But you got a plethora of removal with the red splash.
Yes.
You know,
the entire reason behind the red splash was just for cheap removal. It's not even really there to empower the dragons. I really just don't want to lose before I cast my dragons. So Fiery Impulse, Draconic Roar, this helps keep me alive long enough to start casting the dragons.
Right, this is the first time we've really seen 4 Fiery Impulse in any deck, really, that I've seen in Standard.
Which surprised me. I'd have thought at least the Mill deck, the Blue-Red Sphinxes deck, would have been that interested, but my reasoning here was I'm not that afraid of Hangerback Walker. I'm mostly worried of Mantis Rider. So I wanted a removal spell that still worked on the same time clock, but later in the game could still answer the problem cards like Mantis Rider that I still need to have a removal spell for.
Right, and this deck functions way differently than a lot of the other red decks. You know, obviously this can't go to the face, so it's only removal.
That's true.
And that's all you really care about. You want to stay alive and cast all these dragons.
Though notably, Draconic Roar does go to the face, which I used to take out a Planeswalker that was giving me trouble yesterday, so I still can Dome.
So what about the Standard format has shifted to make this deck well positioned again?
So the format seems to have settled in. It looks like we've seen every deck that we possibly could have expected at this point, and there was a notable absence of control. So I heard a lot of people saying all we need now is for that control deck to appear and then the cycle will be complete. So I figured out, what do I need to make a control deck appear? And I saw a lot of people trying to make the blue-black deck work. The blue-black deck has to draw the right mix of lands and spells. It has to draw the exact right removal at the right time. I'm just going to go over people's heads with these giant dragons and play as much cheap counter magic and removal as I can. This also has the advantage of if I play them, I'm going to crush them as well because I'm going so far over the top of them as well.
Right, yeah, your counter spell suite has Clash of Wills, Dissolve, all that.
Yep, Solemngar Scorn is a messed up magic card. That's the reason to play the deck. But you could play most of these same things in an Esper build. You could play Jeskai Dragons and name the same cards. So the real trick came down to how good Dragonlord Dromoka is with the Crucible and Haven of the Spirit Dragon. And yesterday I beat Blue-Black Control and Mono-Red, 2 very dissimilar decks, on the power of that card alone.
Has some range.
Yes.
And
in both of those matchups, I played a tap land on turn 1, a Crucible on turn 2, and it's just charge, 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 and then I played it with a counterspell backup.
And that's the thing we saw Mike do so well, as with these dragon lands, you can just sit back and wait. You can cast 1 dragon off of 1 land and have all your mana for counter magic.
And most people will give you that time. We're talking about a deck that plays Hangerback Walker for 1 on turn 2, and it doesn't even matter what deck it is, that's just everyone.
Right.
Like my blue-black control opponent played a Hangerback Walker on turn 2. Most people will charge it up once and then start attacking for 2, maybe charge it twice and attack for 3. That gives you a lot of time to just sit there and build up your dragon lands so that later in the game you have this insurmountable advantage.
Yeah, if that's the world we're living in, control is the place to be when people are playing a 2-mana 1/1.
So the trick is figuring out a control deck that works, and all of the cards have to be really high impact, which thankfully all the dragons have covered.
I would say you have a pretty high impact threat base here. You've got Dragonlord Ojutai, Dromoka, Solemngar, Atarka, then of course you got Icefall Regents and Ugin topping it all off.
There is even an Ugin, yes.
With the synergy, of course, with the Dragonlance still, you can even get back Ugin.
And you tend to see it in the long games due to dig through time. So if you can find the Ugin, you can cast it 2 or 3 times until it sticks.
Yeah. All right, sideboard, you got a little bit more of the same. You got more dragons. You got the other Solemngar kind of fighting all the tokens and the Thopters.
He's really good against Hangerback Walker. Who knew?
Shocker. Of course, another prerogative to draw you more cards. And then
it really is important to win the control mirror the few times you run into it. And as good as dig through time is, just drawing 4 cards uncounterably is the key to just winning these matchups.
Yeah, I mean, Dig's only 2 cards, Dragon Lord's 4 cards.
I mean, Dig, you get to choose the best of 7, so it's a little bit more than 2 cards, but Prerogative, it really is just draw a full hand and they can't do anything. Playing Control, we fought a lot over each other's Digs, and then I cast Dragon Lord's Prerogative and he died.
Yeah. The other thing about this deck is that you have 3 Anger of the Gods in the sideboard, which in a format where, you know, again, hanger back and all these little guys are running around.
Don't forget Deathmiss Raptor.
Yeah.
Our opponents haven't.
Yeah. The Deathmiss Raptor Den Protector package does a pretty good solid beating on those guys too. Of course, the other thing that stuck out to me is Voyage's End. Theros Draft All-Star.
Yes, I played it in many fine Theros drafts.
Where's this coming in?
Mike played it as one of his removal spells of choice. He admittedly had very limited options since he stuck to mono blue. I've gone further. Like, he had a bunch of blue lands and he was playing random off-color temples for the cast a dragon effect, but also the scry effect. I focused on Temple of Epiphany. I have Shivan Reefs. I have Mystic Monastery. So I focused in on that. I can cast the red spells for better removal, but removal has to kill the right things, and I can't otherwise kill an Ensoul Artifacted anything. So I figured the answer to Ensoul Artifact was bounce the thing.
Right, that's one thing. When Mike played the deck, the Thopters deck wasn't a thing. You didn't have to worry about that. Now it's all over the metagame. It took the Pro Tour by storm. You got to have answers for it.
I've so far never boarded in. I've been very happy about that fact since I've never played my worst matchup.
All right. Well,
it's even worse than the Mono Red. Mono Red I'm actually doing surprisingly well with. Like, Mike prepared for his event. He knew going into it that Mono Red was a bad thing and he had to be prepared with a sideboard plan that could at least bring him to 50%. I have Anger of the Gods, I have Encase in Ice, I have all the cheap removal. I'm pretty well set against them to not get into burn range, and then I can bury them under Dragon Lord Dromoka.
Yeah.
These things do not work against a turn 2 Ensoul Artifact. They just don't.
Yeah, Dromoka just seems so good, not only just blunting the damage, but also making your stuff uncounterable when you need to.
That is how I tend to resolve my dig through times. On my turn.
All right, Sean, the deck looks great. It's cool to see this deck back in action with a new twist, with some new cards. So,
well, I was actually inspired by a Humble card more than anything else. I decided to try this out when I was looking for a good Clash of Wills deck. And the other thing Mike didn't have was Clash of Wills, because it didn't exist. He built his base around Silumgar's Sword and Dissolve, and these are both great, but I have 7 turn 2 counters if I want to. So I'm getting that extra little bit ahead. And then I figured out, well, you can splash for another color of removal, so that gets me even further ahead thanks to Fiery Impulse and Draconic Roar.
The proof's in the pudding. You're 4-0 so far. You got another standard portion coming up on day 2. Sean, thanks for joining me here in the sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Jersey.